10 years from now, what would that be? Thank you.
I'm back in the prediction business. Well, let's use history to help us. Currently, the dysfunctional monetary union is inflicting depression levels of unemployment and higher than depression levels of youth unemployment on most southern European countries. There's really no end in sight to this because both the fiscal and monetary policies ensure a continued credit contraction in southern Europe. One lesson of the depression is that depression is contagious. And this depression is actually spreading. And when it spreads, as it has, I think, in many ways already to France, we will see the next phase of the European crisis begin. As France is relegated from core to periphery where it belongs, the whole structure of the European Union will be called fundamentally into question. This is a matter of months away, perhaps even weeks. I was in Paris just a few weeks ago. The Hollande government is like something out of the 1930s in many ways. It is such incompetence, such lack of courage, as I have seldom seen in a West European country. And the beneficiaries are the Front National, the National Front. Using history again as our guide, the depression spreads, the populists gain. Can the populists gain power, though? That's not so obvious. In one respect, we're different from the 1930s. We have an anti-populist mechanism in place. Jörg Haider was the first to find this. The populists gain at the polls, do well in the elections, but they cannot form governments. And it may be in that respect that there's a check on what can go wrong. But if one populist government is formed, the next phase of the tragedy will unfold. What will happen? At some point, somebody is going to say the unsayable and say we'd be better off outside this monetary union. The great mistake last year was to think it might be a small country like Greece. Small countries don't have that bargaining power. The big countries do. Either Spain or Italy would be better out of the Eurozone, I'm quite sure. It would be painful in the short term, but it would get them out of the mess at some point fairly soon after that. So the next phase of the story is somebody says the unsayable. There's a run on the Spanish banks and it's game over for the euro. You asked for a worst case scenario. I said this is a 10% probability scenario, so it's quite a high probability. The only thing that's keeping the Spanish banks alive is the inexplicable inertia of Spanish depositors. I thought Cyprus would cause them to run, but people are always a little lazy when it comes to changing their banks. At some point that will change though, and people who speak Spanish know what happened in Argentina as well as what happened in Cyprus. So with the breakdown of the Eurozone, there'll be a period of at least a year of total chaos. And in that period, others will obviously leave. The whole thing will be very powerfully centrifugal. And the opportunity for populists to say the European elites are frauds as well as crooks will be irresistible. And we will see major gains on the political extremes, both left and right. The left will do better in some countries, the right will do better in others. And finally, my worst case scenario will conclude with many, many more outbreaks of urban violence predominantly between immigrants radicalized by Islam and young whites, unskilled, unemployed. At which point we will have pulled off an amazing feat, the feat of rerunning the 1930s in Europe, when the entire historical profession spent a very large part of the last half century trying to prevent that from happening and telling itself that by teaching the lessons of the 1930s we'd avoid their repetition. The richest irony of all is that the whole program of European integration was supposed to make this impossible, but because of incredibly faulty design and indeed downright stupidity on the part of the people who came up with the idea of the monetary union, we've made it much more likely to happen again. I could go on.